Bonjour mes amis, this is St. Raz, and it's another lovely morning at Cajun Coding. Sitting here with a warm cup of cafe au lait, and while we're discussing coffee, we are learning Java with Nick Parlante's great site Codingbat. As usual, hope you've looked over this exercise. Hopefully you were able to solve it, and you're looking here for alternate solutions, learn a little bit more about how Java works in particular and coding in general, or you got stuck and you need a little help there. Now there is a solution, show solution button here that that'll allow you to look at that, so you're not going to be stuck on the early warm-ups. But as problems get harder, the solutions that they provide end up disappearing, which is kind of weird. But we're going to go on and get started here. This is the warm-up 1 section, exercise front 3. Given a string, we'll say that the front is the first 3 characters of the string. If the string length is less than 3, the front is whatever is there. Return a new string, which is 3 copies of the front. So with this particular exercise, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and initialize that front. So the variable type is going to be string. Remember to capitalize string, and we'll go ahead and use, let me see, let's just name it front, and we're going to initialize that. We can initialize it as an empty string. What that does is it creates the variable. The compiler sets aside a spot in memory for that variable, but there's no value in it. And remember that an empty string is different from a string containing 1 or more spaces only. The space, even though you don't see it, is still a character. Okay, so now we have a conditional. Okay, it's first 3 characters or the entire string if it's less than 3. So let's check on that. So if, and we're going to use what here? We're going to use length. Remember, length method has an empty parentheses there, and if strength is less than, it's the first 3 characters. So if it's less than 3, we're going ahead and set front using the assignment operator, front to whatever is there, to string. And now the second block there is the else block. So if the string length is 3 or more, so it's not less than 3, then we're going to set front using the assignment operator, and we're going to set it to a substring, and the first 3 characters is a start index 0 and go to 3. So now we've set front, return a new string which is 3 copies of the front. There's a couple ways to do this, but we can simply return, if I can type it, front, and then we use the concatenate operator, front, and that's the simplest way, and this should work. There we go. Now I've got a timer here. I'm going to time these videos to be about 30 minutes. If we go a little just short and have an exercise, or if we go over a little bit, that's fine. And of course you can jump around and search for what you need. Particular problem, I'll put some mention on the comments section, or rather the description of the video, so you can see what's covered, what exercises are covered, and also the kind of content that we have in terms of what keywords, what programming concepts and such. So back around. Given a string, take the last character and return a new string with the last character added at the front and back. So cat yields tcat, 2 t's at the end. The original string will be length 1 or more. Okay, so what we're looking to do here is we're going to yield, say this in this example here, we're giving the original string cat, but we're also going to add the last character to the front and then another copy of the last character to the back. So obviously we're going to be using concatenation. So the last line of our code, put a little space here, return, and then we'll return the string, but we're also going to put the last character at the end, and we'll also put the last character to the front. See? Now the question is, how do we get that last character? Because it's not going to just respond the last character. We have to do that in a language that the program can understand. Oops, the wrong button. So how do we put the last character there? Okay, so we're going to grab it out of string, and what is it we're looking for? We can do a substring, but I would like to introduce something else to you. What we're going to do is charAt, and that's the charAt method. And what we're going to do is we need to put an index in there. Now we know it's going to be the last character, so we can do string length, and remember it's 0 indexed. So string length, remember the empty parentheses, -1, and then we have to close these parentheses. This closure is the closure for the charAt method. So parentheses and braces and closures like that are going to be a constant source of frustration and distraction, unfortunately. Now, usually in most integrated development environments, if you click on a closure character, it will show you the other one here. So this is our closing brace, and it highlights the other brace. And it's not very visible in this particular IDE, but we're not going to look at a gift horse in the mouth after Mr. Palante was so kind to provide us this work environment here. So the last character again, what are we doing? Well, it's the same character again. So string charAt, and then the last character, -1, and then we remember the semicolon there. And I think that should do it. Yes, there it is. Now, I don't think, see, the original string would be length 1 or more. This works fine as long as the original string length is 1 or more. If they pass in an empty string, what happens? Well, we would probably get a string out of bounds exception there. Don't have to worry about that in this case. On to the next one. See, or 35. Return true if the given non-negative number is a multiple of 3 or a multiple of 5. Use the mod operator. The mod operator is short for modulo or modulus. Modulo or modulus, also sometimes called remainder. It uses the percent sign character, which most keyboards is shift 5. Remember back to grade school when you first learned how to do division, but you didn't do floating numbers yet. You didn't have decimals. So they told you just work out how many times x will go into y, and then you get a quotient. It might not be even, and you may have a remainder. And that's kind of what modulus is. Instead of 10 divided by 3, instead of having a decimal point, with integer division, the answer to 10 divided by 3 is just 3, and the compiler drops that remainder. Now, in some cases, the remainder is the only part that you actually want. So 10 modulo 3, the compiler divides 10 by 3. 3 times 3 is 9. There's not 3 left, there's just the 1 left. So that 1 is the part that the compiler returns, just that remainder. So 10 in integer division. In integer division is just whole numbers. We don't deal with floating, we don't deal with decimal points with floating numbers. There's a way to do that, but we'll get to that later. So in integer division, 10 divided by 3 is just 3. It drops the remainder. 10 modulo 3 is 1. And that comes in handy, and we'll see through the exercises there are a lot of places where you want to perform a certain operation every X iterations, and using modulo you can do that. Or you can use X modulo 10, will give you just the character in the ones place. Because you divide any number by any whole number by 10, the result is going to be just that character in the ones place. So here we go. So what are we going to do? Return true if the given non-negative number is a multiple of 3 or a multiple of 5. So if a given number, integer n, you see here it's passing in the integer n, if n modulo 3 is equal to, if it's evenly an even multiple of 3, then n modulo 3 would be 0. Or a multiple of 5. So this is going to return a boolean, so we can use the or operator. N modulo 5 equals 0. Return true. Otherwise, return false. And there we go. And show the solution, and I think I know what they're going to have here. Look at that. Single line. See? This is returning a boolean, so, and they use the enclosures a little differently than I did, but that's okay. It still works out the same logically, but since we're returning a boolean, just use the return. And if it resolves to false, it returns false, so we don't have to use these if-else statements. Props if you remembered to do that. Given a string, take the first 2 characters and return the string with the 2 characters added at both the front and back. So kitten yields key, kitten, key. If the string length is less than 2, use whatever characters are there. And a lot of our logic is going to be on those edge cases. So, as in most cases, I'm not sure if this is the way most people like to approach this, but I like to hit this if first. So let's check to see how we're going to do this if the string is less than 2. So if the string, and we're going to use the length method, if I can spell it correctly, less than 2. This is what we're going to do. If the string is less than 2, use whatever characters are there. Now we're adding those characters to the front of the string and to the back of the string. So all we have to do is return the string. That's our 2 or fewer characters at the front. Actually, we can use less than 3 here, because if it's 2, it comes out to the same thing, right? String, string, and that's it. Else, now we need to grab just the first 2 characters, so return string substring and the first 2 characters plus the entire string, however long that might be, and then string substring again, and that should do it. And it does. And I think this would be the same if we use less than 2. Yeah, it works the same way. If we use less than 1 though, see, here we go, string out of bounds exception. In most integrated development environments, if you hold down Control and hit Z, it will change the code to something it was previously. See? I wonder if I shift. Oh, there it goes. So Control Z will remove your last changes to the code. Control Shift Z will move forward and restore those changes that you just reverted. And that's pretty common. I'm not at all surprised. I didn't know when I checked, but I wasn't surprised to see that was the case here. That can save you a lot of time. So moving on to the next exercise, front 22, start high. Given a string, return true if the string starts with high and false otherwise. All right, this is exciting. We're going to discover a new method here. So what we're going to do now, it says return true if whatever and false otherwise. So what are we going to do? We're going to start out, we're just going to do return, and then it's going to return a Boolean value. And we're passing in string here. Okay, so return, okay, and we're not going to have to use an if because we're just going to do assess, we're just going to evaluate a statement. The statement is string substring, and the substring is the first two characters. Now you might be tempted to say, hey, we're going to do something, we're going to do equals. Actually, we're not going to do equals because strings aren't numbers, so they don't equal in the sense that we're going to use the equals operator. So what we're going to do is we're going to call another method, and this method, just to confuse things, is equals, and it has parentheses that we're going to pass a value into. This is the string method equals, not the arithmetic operator or comparator equals, represented by the two equals signs. So don't get confused by that, but once you practice a little bit, it's going to be second nature to you. Now, since this is string stuff, we're going to use the double quotes there. What are we checking for? We're checking for high. And that is pretty much it. What happened though? We have string index out of bounds, and look what they're passing in: an empty string and a string that has only one. So we're going to have to work with those edge cases. We're checking to see if the string starts with these two characters. So our edge case is going to be any input that has less than two characters. So can we not do this with just a single line of code? Actually, we can. If we do string length is greater than, we can do greater than 1, or we can do greater than or equal to 2, and string substring 0 2 dot equals high, and that should fix it, and we're all correct. This works even though what we have here is an arithmetic comparison, and then what we have here is a check on the contents of a string. And the reason we have that is this double ampersand here, the and comparator. This entire statement returns a Boolean. This is true or false. This entire statement returns a Boolean. It's true or false. Even though this is a string, this is a string, this is a substring of that string that the method is called on. When we add this equals, it either equals our parameter we passed in there, or it doesn't equal. That makes this whole thing return a Boolean value, and all we're doing is we're using the AND comparator to check this Boolean value and this Boolean value. So we return string length is greater than 1 and string substring 0 2 equals high. Now, one thing you should know about the compiler in Java is that when you are looking at these comparisons, it's for when you see the AND here, that left side is going to be assessed first. If that left side is assessed first and it fails and there's an AND here, the compiler does not even read this. It doesn't get to this. Because if this is false, then this and this cannot possibly be true. Both have to be true in order for the statement to return as true. Okay, so that's useful to keep in mind. Sometimes you can use that, say there's a value over here that would be invalid if the left side of the AND comparison is false. Maybe this would by itself would throw an error of some kind, But if this is false and you're using an AND comparator, then you don't have to worry about what the compiler would do this, because it's not even going to read it. Okay, moving on to the next one. We're about 20 minutes in. I'm pretty confident we can get the next one done in 10 minutes. Given two temperatures, return true if one is less than 0 and the other is greater than 0. Icy hot. Okay, and this is going to return a Boolean. So it's going to be true or false after all of our code executes. And it's passing in two integers, temp1 and temp2. So we return temp1 is greater than, greater than 100, and temp2 is less than 0. Or we can do temp1 is less than 0 and temp2 is greater than 100. And we try to be consistent with the code here. See, there's not a space there. Let's go ahead and put this space there. And I think this should run fine. It does. Certainly wouldn't hurt readability if we were to enclose that in parentheses there in their solution. And they used a more verbose solution there when they could have done it in just one line of code. But this is fine as well. I think we can get another one done. Let's do another few. Let me see. Given two integer values in 1020, given two integer values, return true if either of them is in the range 10 to 20 inclusive. If either one is in the range 10, 20 inclusive. So let me see. Return integer a. A is greater than or equal to, because it's inclusive, 10. If it's in that range, it has to be both greater than or equal to 10 and less than, and a is less than or equal to 20. Now remember, when you're doing these using the AND, it's a is greater than or equal to 10 and a is less than or equal to 20. You don't get to just leave the a out and say it's greater than or equal to 10 and less than or equal to 20. What is less than or equal to 20? You got to put the variable name in there again. Now it says if either of them is in the range, so we're going to use the or, and we're going to use b greater than or equal to 10 and b is less than or equal to 20. This isn't much of a change from the previous ones. This is just practice. Repeat over this stuff several times. Martial artist and movie star Bruce Lee once said, "I don't fear the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." We're not doing kung fu, but repetition certainly helps train the mind as well as the body. The idea is to practice to the extent that you're not really thinking about how to do it. You just kind of get into it. You're thinking about the problem, not the tools that you're using to solve the problem, because you know the tools. In a way, the craftsman has become a master when the tools become invisible. He's thinking about the problem, not how to hold the hammer, how to approach the anvil, how to stoke the fire in a blacksmith type example. The tools become invisible. The tools are there. They're just an extension of your body or of your mind in the case of knowledge workers. The tools don't have your attention. The problem has your attention. You know how to use the tools. So, on to has teen. We'll say number is teen if it is in the range 13 to 19 inclusive. Makes sense. Given three integer values, return true if one or more of them are teen. Okay, so we've got our basic comparator. We know how to check the range. We've done that before. So what we're going to do is we're going to return true if any of them are teen. Okay, so if, let's check the first one, a is greater than or equal to 13 and in the range, so it has to be both. A is less than or equal to 19. Return true. Now, a principle in coding is you shouldn't repeat yourself too much. This principle called, my instructor called it dry. You need to be dry with your code. Don't repeat yourself. D-R-Y. Dry code. When you're first learning, maybe dryness isn't the most important thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to repeat ourselves a little bit. All I had to do is change this to a B. We're checking the range of B. And we need to check the range of C. Return false. And what's going on here? What we're doing is we're checking the range of A. And if A is in that range, then we return true. Now if we return true with this line right here, we kick out of this function. The function starts here. You notice this bracket here? This is our whole function. If we return true here, it kicks out of the function. Because if A is true, then it doesn't matter what B and C are, because we're looking to see if any of them is true. If A is false, it executes this if block. If it's true, it doesn't matter what C is, we return true. If we do this block and we haven't encountered anything true, this resolves to false, then it executes the next line of code here, false. Nothing was inside the parameters we were looking for. Nothing was in that range, so the default value is false. But we never get there if any of these are true. That goes back to the fact that the function returns one time. Once it returns, it doesn't execute any more code in it unless it is called again. Loneteen. We'll say number is teen if it is in the range 13, 19 exclusive. Given two integer values, return true if one or the other is teen, but not both. So how do we do that? We're going to introduce something new also. Let me see. Return A is greater than or equal to 13 and A is less than or equal to 19, and we're going to use some enclosures here. And this is going to look very similar. B is greater than or equal to 13 and B is less than or equal to 19. Now right here we put the comparator. This is the OR comparator. However, the problem with OR is that it says if one or the other is teen but not both. Well, this is the regular OR comparator, and when people say OR, even programmers, this is what they're talking about almost all the time. However, there's another OR, and it's sometimes called XOR. And the XOR is the exclusive. And I can't do it. There we go. Exclusive OR. XOR. And it is represented by the charAt. And that is Shift 6 on most keyboards. And the XOR will return true only if one is true but not the other. Now in the order of operations, remember if we used an AND here, it will read the first statement. If we use the inclusive OR, it'll read this first statement. Okay, if this is true, if this is false for an AND, then it won't read the second one, because both of them have to be true. It doesn't have to read the second one. If the first one's false, then the whole thing's going to be false. In the inclusive OR, if the first one is true, then it won't read the second statement, because if the first one is true, then the second one can be true or false, but it's still going to return true. And if we use the XOR, the exclusive OR, then if the first one resolves to true or false, it's always going to read the second one, because we have to know the value of both of them. Also, I'm going to put this is commented out. I don't think we went over that. Comments, 2 slashes, regular slashes, will comment out the entire line of code. It does not matter what's here. The compiler doesn't see it. We just use that to add notes for ourselves or for others. That's purely for the benefit of the human beings involved in the process. And you see this works fine here. The solution here, this is a little more verbose. Oh wait. And it says that the XOR operator is obscure. Really? I didn't know that that was considered obscure. Let me see. Return. See. What they're doing here is they're storing the value here. They're converting this statement into a Boolean. So Boolean 18, Boolean B-teen. Okay. And notice here, they got little slashes here. These are comments. So you can paste this code directly into our workspace here. And that's what I'm going to do right here. Oh, come on. There we go. And we can run this again, and it works, see? But the compiler doesn't read these lines, and notice that they do turn green, just to indicate that these are comments and they're not executed. So anyway, we store this value into Boolean 18, Boolean B-teen. Now we return 18 and not B-teen. You see the bang there? 18 and not B-teen, or not 18 and B-teen. And it's returning either this is true and this is false, but if this is false, then the bang converts it to true. So either this is true or this is true. It's not complicated conceptually, even though if you're not used to it, you have to kind of go through the steps to figure out what's going on. But that's just part of the process. And like any spoken or written language, eventually when you become very familiar with this, with code, you read code. It's kind of like reading a newspaper. If someone who's illiterate, completely illiterate, unfamiliar with the alphabet, looks at a newspaper, or if you look at a newspaper that's in an alphabet that you're completely unfamiliar with, say you only read and write English, look at a newspaper in Hindi or Hangul or Greek, which uses a different alphabet. It seems like a daunting task. You know, how could you possibly make sense of that? You have to start with the very basics. In programming languages, those basics are the keywords and the rules for how to put them together with variables and other things. And in a written or spoken language, or a written language, it's going to be the alphabet. You have to start with the letters and then move on from there. But eventually it becomes second nature. I think that's about enough time for now. Thanks for tuning in. Comment, like, subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, go ahead and put them in comments, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much.